Peter William Sutcliffe, an English serial killer. He was born on June 2, 1946. His father, John William Sutcliffe, was involved with the local Anglican church, St. Wilfrid's. His mother, Kathleen Frances Coonan, came from an Irish family but grew up in Yorkshire. She was a devoted Catholic, and people often said she was a kind woman, a good mother to her 7 children. Peter was the eldest. From a young age, Peter stood out. At school, his shyness set him apart. He didn't mix with the other children, and during breaks, he would stand alone in the playground. Bullies often picked on him. At home, though, he clung to his mother, always staying by her side. When he left school at 15, Peter struggled to find his place in the world. He tried different jobs, but none of them worked out, until he found work as a gravedigger. He loved it. Death fascinated him, but there was something darker, too. He later claimed that one gravestone spoke to him. At first, it said nice things. Then, its tone shifted. Prostitutes were dirty, it told him, evil, and that Peter needed to rid the world of them. On Valentine's Day, 1969, Peter's life took a new turn. He met 16-year-old Sonia Surma in the Royal Standard pub, right in Bradford's red light district. They began dating, and 5 years later, on the 10th of August, 1974, they married. At first, they lived with Sonia's parents in Clayton. Later, they bought their own house on Garden Lane, in Heaton. Peter gained his HGV license and got a job as a lorry driver with MTH Clark Transport. For a while, life seemed steady, but things changed when Peter found out Sonia had cheated on him. To get back at her, he went to a prostitute. He couldn't perform, but still handed her a £10 note. She promised to bring him the change. She never returned. The next night, Peter wasn't finished. This time, he brought a friend, Trevor. Together, they went back to the district, looking for the girl. That night, Peter and Trevor sat in the van, waiting, watching. Then, Peter pulled something from his pocket. He stepped out. Trevor watched as Peter walked up St. Paul's Road, disappearing out of sight. In his hand, a sock, weighted down with heavy stones. Ahead of him, a lone woman, a prostitute. Within seconds, he pounced. He swung the sock with all his force, striking her across the head. She crumpled to the ground. But then, lights. Someone was coming. Panic. Peter turned and ran back to the van. "Get out of here, Trevor," he shouted. The very next day, police came knocking. The woman had reported him. She'd seen his number plate, but she refused to press charges. So all Peter got was a warning. And that was it. The first to die was Wilma Mary McCann, 28 years old, a mother of 3. She was last seen leaving her home on Scott Hall Avenue in Chapeltown, Leeds, around 7:30 in the evening, October 30th, 1975. As she walked past Prince Philip's playground, Sutcliffe struck, a hammer to the head. Wilma collapsed, helpless. Then came the frenzy, stab after stab, into her neck, her chest, her stomach. Her body was found in an alleyway, mutilated, her top pulled up. His next victim, Emily Monica Jackson, 42 years old, a mother of 3. Emily turned to prostitution just to help pay the bills. Often, her husband went with her. He'd wait in a pub while she worked. Then they'd meet up and walk home together. But on the night of January 20th, 1976, Emily met Peter Sutcliffe. He picked her up, drove her out. Then, he told her something was wrong with the car. He pulled over, lifted the bonnet. Emily leaned forward to look inside, and that's when he struck, a hammer to the back of her head. Then the attack escalated. 51 stab wounds. A sharpened screwdriver plunged again and again. He stood on her body, so hard that he left his footprint behind. Then, without a glance back, Sutcliffe got in his car and drove away. The next victim was Irene Richardson, a 28-year-old prostitute, a mother of 3. Irene had no money and nowhere stable to live. She'd been staying with friends in Leeds. On the night of February 5th, 1977, she was last seen outside Cowper House around 11 p.m. Meanwhile, Peter Sutcliffe was prowling the streets, driving, searching, hunting. He cruised past the Gaiety pub when he spotted her. Irene Richardson. He slowed, stopped the car just ahead of her. Irene walked straight over and got in. Sutcliffe drove her about a mile into Roundhay Park, an area known locally as Soldiers' Field. When they stopped, Irene stepped out of the car. Sutcliffe followed, hammer and Stanley knife hidden in his pocket. Irene needed the toilet, but finding the doors locked, she squatted just outside. Vulnerable. That's when Sutcliffe struck. 3 savage blows with the hammer. One caved in her skull, driving a fragment of bone deep into her brain. As she lay helpless, he ripped open her blouse. He slashed and stabbed at her with the blade. Then, headlights. A car was coming. In a panic, Sutcliffe pulled her coat over her legs, ran back to his vehicle, and sped away. The next morning, a jogger named John Bolton made a grim discovery. At the rear of the pavilion, he found Irene's body lying face down. When he realized she was dead, he alerted the police. The coroner's examination revealed the brutality of her final moments. Irene had been stabbed in the neck, the chest, her stomach slashed open so deeply that her intestines were hanging out. By this point, Sutcliffe had claimed more than one life. Another victim, Emily Jackson, 42 years old, a part-time prostitute, had been murdered by him just weeks earlier, on January 20th. That night, Sutcliffe did what he always did. He curb-crawled, driving slowly, scanning the streets, watching. When he passed the Gaiety pub in Leeds, he saw Emily. He pulled over, opened the car door, and waited. Emily approached and got in. Sutcliffe drove her out to an abandoned area. He drove her to the abandoned buildings in Manor Street Industrial Estate. As Emily spoke to him, she turned her head, and in that instant, Sutcliffe struck. A hammer blow to the skull. She collapsed. He dragged her body into the derelict yard, and then unleashed a frenzy of violence. 52 stab wounds, each one delivered with a sharpened screwdriver. The next morning, workmen found her body. Just 3 months later, April 24, 1977, Patricia Atkinson became his next victim. Patricia was a 32-year-old prostitute from Manningham, Bradford, a mother of 3. That night, she'd been out drinking in the Carlisle public. As the evening came to a close, a man she didn't know offered her a lift home. The man was Peter Sutcliffe. She accepted. On the drive, she even invited him in. And when they arrived at her flat, Patricia got out first. Behind her, Sutcliffe picked up his claw hammer. As she turned to face him, he swung, smashing her across the head with brutal force. She fell instantly. He struck her again. And again. He could hear bones crack, blood spraying as he delivered blow after blow. Dragging her to the bed, he stripped her clothes away and stabbed deep into her stomach. He slashed at her chest, her throat, her flesh torn open in savage cuts. He turned her blood-soaked body over. With the knife, he carved across her buttocks, then hacked repeatedly into her back. When it was done, Sutcliffe covered her body and walked away as if nothing had happened. The next day, Patricia's friend discovered her corpse. On June 26, 1977, Sutcliffe struck again. His victim this time was Jane MacDonald, just 16 years old, fresh out of school, working as a shop assistant. That night, Jane was walking home after a night out with her friends. She never made it. Sutcliffe stalked her, waited in the shadows, then attacked. A hammer to the back of her head, the blow so powerful it knocked her to the ground. Then came the knife. He stabbed her again and again. The next morning, Jane's body was found in a playground in Reginald Park, Chapeltown, Leeds. Jean Jordan, a mother of 2, from Manchester, on the 1st of October 1977, Jean Jordan left her home to go to the shop. That same night, Peter Sutcliffe was circling the red light district, hunting for his next victim. He spotted Jean, talking to a man in another car. Sutcliffe pulled up behind them. Jean noticed him, left the other car, and got in with him. He drove her down Princess Road and stopped in a patch of waste ground. As Jean walked ahead of him, Sutcliffe attacked from behind. Hammer blows to the skull, again and again, until she was dead. Then came the knife. But headlights approached. Another car. In a panic, Sutcliffe leapt into his vehicle and fled. He'd forgotten something crucial. He had given Jean a £5 note. one that could be traced back to his work. The following week, fear drove him back to her body. He searched frantically, desperate to find the note. But it was gone. In frustration, he stripped away her clothes, snapped a branch from a tree, and mutilated her corpse. Her stomach split open so violently the stench made him vomit. Days later, 2 men searching for broken bricks stumbled across her remains and called the police. The £5 note was found and traced back to Sutcliffe's employer. But when questioned, Peter Sutcliffe produced an alibi. Satisfied, the police let him go. On March 26, 1978, Sutcliffe struck again. This time, the victim was Yvonne Pearson, a 21-year-old prostitute from Leeds, a mother of 2. That night, Yvonne had been drinking at the Flying Dutchman pub on Lum Lane in Bradford. As she left, she told her friends, "I'm off now to earn some money." Sutcliffe parked nearby in Southfield Square. When Yvonne spotted him, she walked over, opened the car door, and said, "I know a place where we could do business." He drove her to waste ground on Arthington Street. As Yvonne prepared to get into the back seat, Sutcliffe attacked. A hammer strike to the head. Hearing another car approach, it being a well-known spot for prostitutes, he dragged her body to an abandoned sofa and shoved her beneath it. When the coast was clear, he pulled her out again and stuffed her body deeper under the frame. 2 months later, passers-by discovered the decomposing remains. Helen Rittker, 18 years old, from Huddersfield. On January 31st, 1978, Helen Rittker, just 18 years old, went out to the red light district on Great Northern Street. She was waiting for a client when Sutcliffe pulled up. He leaned over and coaxed her. "Come on, you must have time for a quick one." She got in. They drove off together. Sutcliffe stopped, pretending he needed the toilet. When he returned to the car, he opened the passenger door. And then, he struck. A hammer to the skull. But as he looked up, 2 taxi drivers sat watching. He froze, waiting. Only when the taxis finally left did he continue. He stabbed Helen 13 times, in the heart and the chest, before dragging her body out of the car and driving away. 3 days later, police searching for something else found her remains. The violence didn't stop. On May 1st, 1978, Vera Millwood, a prostitute and mother of 7 from the Hume area of Manchester, crossed Sutcliffe's path. He beat her savagely with a hammer, stabbed her multiple times, and dumped her body near the Manchester Royal Infirmary. Then came Josephine Whittaker, a 19-year-old building society worker from Halifax. In April 1979, she was walking home when Sutcliffe ambushed her. A hammer blow to the head. Repeated stab wounds followed. By September of that same year, he struck again. Barbara Leach, a 20-year-old student from Bradford. After a night out with friends, she was nearly home when Sutcliffe followed her. Just yards from her front door, he struck, hammer to the skull, 8 stab wounds to the chest. He dragged her body beneath the steps leading up to her own back door and left her there. In August 1980, he murdered Marguerite Walls, a 47-year-old civil servant. Then in November, Jacqueline Hill, a 20-year-old student, last seen after a meal in Headingley. Sutcliffe watched her get off a bus, followed her into Alma Road, and attacked. He murdered her on waste ground, her body left discarded in the dark. By now, police were closing in. And in January 1981, 2 officers stopped Sutcliffe after spotting him in a car with a 24-year-old prostitute. 1981, the night the shadow of the Ripper finally broke. 2 officers stopped Sutcliffe's car, their suspicion drawn by the false number plates. What seemed like a routine check spiraled into the end of a reign of terror. Arrested and placed in the back of their car, Richard asked for a moment to relieve himself. Permission granted. He stepped outside, calm and calculating. But as he stood by the wall, his mask of composure slipped. From his pocket he quietly dropped the tools of his trade: a hammer, knife, screwdriver, and rope. The very weapons that had torn a path of blood across the north. He thought he'd rid himself of the evidence. He thought wrong. At the station, the questions came. The blood test, the shoe size, the trail of evidence leading back to him, including that cursed £5 note given to Jean Jordan, traced directly to his payroll. And when officers returned to the spot of his arrest, they uncovered the discarded weapons. It was over. The Ripper was unmasked. Brought before the court, Richard was handed down his fate. Life, not in an ordinary prison, but confined to the walls of Broadmead Psychiatric Hospital. 13 women murdered. 7 more who escaped with their lives but carried scars that would never heal. The tally of destruction etched in blood across Leeds, Bradford, Manchester, and beyond. Time dragged on. The man who once struck fear into the streets lived out his years behind bars. And then, in November 2020, at the age of 74, Richard Sutcliffe succumbed not to justice, but to COVID-19, dying in hospital with the world watching. But the shadow he cast reached further. Jack Humble, the so-called Wareside Jack, who faked letters and tapes to mislead the investigation, was unmasked too. His lies and deception bought the Ripper 18 more months of freedom, 18 more months of murder. For obstructing justice, Humble received 8 years behind bars. A bitter reminder that falsehoods can kill as surely as blades and hammers. And so it ended, not with mystery, but with the cold, unflinching truth. The Yorkshire Ripper was dead. But for the families of the women he butchered, the wounds he carved into their lives will never close. His name remains a dark echo in the history of Britain, a monster finally caged, and at last, silenced.